Coming to the next session, I would like to draw your attention towards this session because this is on multilingual internet, Bhasha internet. Here, I would like to call upon panelists Mahesh Kulkarni, ex-C-DAC, Akshat Joshi, founder ThinkTrans, Nakul Kundra, chairman and founder Devnagri. The session will be moderated by Gajendra Upadhyay, editor, Voice&Data. Over to you, Gajendra.
Good afternoon and welcome to all to this session today in the afternoon. We are going to talk today about a very interesting topic that actually impacts the growth of internet in India over the next 3 to 5 years. And we're talking of reaching the next 500 to 1 billion users as the internet grows in the language of their personal choice. We are talking of both the content side as well as the application side. We have with us three really eminent persons who have worked very closely in the area of language and regional languages. First of all, I would like to introduce Mahesh Kulkarniji, who has been associated in this sector for more than 35 years. He was formerly Senior Director, Corporate R&D at the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, which is C-DAC. And he's currently on a mission to promote AI and ML use in language technologies. Welcome, sir. Second, we have Akshat Joshi, who is also been involved for the last 12 to 14 years in the area of language computing. He currently is the founder of a company called ThinkTrans, which is working in the area of democratizing internet access points and developing Indian languages. Akshat has done some pioneering work, and he is currently also working with the ICANN. Welcome, Akshat. And finally, we have Nakul Kundra, one of the youngest in our group today, a startup founder of a company called Devnagri, which has created a wholly indigenous language translation engine covering all 12 plus Indian languages. And he's looking at translating all the content on the internet into regional languages such that it becomes accessible to Indian users. Thanks and welcome, Nakul. I will start with a quick question to Mahesh ji to start off this session. So there have been many initiatives by the government in the area of language translations and computing. Can you throw some light on what has been the efforts in the past?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. It is my proud privilege to be here and throw some light on what exactly is happening into the Indian language technology. Actually, it can go way back to 1988, basically, if you really look at a language computing, wherein the first integrated Devnagri terminal was developed. It was basically like a multilingual or rather multi-processing system like Linux was connected to that. And it was first demonstrated in the World Hindi Conference at that point of time. And it was basically at that point of time, it was difficult even to have the encodings and so on and so forth. So the journey started with actually making a keyboard available. The journey started with basically the encoding for the Indian languages. And the journey started with developing the fonts. So these are the three basic fundamental things which any machine is expected to have basically language technology in place, first and foremost things. So if you look at the standards at that point of time, which was the ISKI, which is called the Indian Standard Code for Information Interchange, which was like ASCII standard, but supporting all Indian languages. Then came the InScript keyboard. So basically, as I said to you, fundamentally, the government actually worked on something called as a standardization. So this is a very, very important task so that everybody basically onto the same page. So standardization started. Over a period of time, if you really look at it, then the Windows, the graphics era started. It was earlier a text-based era. Now the graphics era started. And then the Windows platform came, the Mac came, and so on and so forth. Then basically the whole paradigm has shifted basically from a text processing to something called the graphics processing. And obviously, a lot of companies now started realizing the requirement of Indian languages and started working towards that. So Microsoft, then Apple, and everybody started working towards that. And as you can see, basically government played a very, very vital role in this particular regard. As far as the government research angle goes, basically there is a program of government which is called the TDIL, which is called the Technology Development in Indian Language Program, which parallelly started in the year 1988, and it's the sole mission to promote, create, and make awareness of Indian languages in the whole community, basically. So mission mode projects were initiated. A lot of mission mode projects were initiated in recent past also, as well as in the previous years. Like some of the mission mode projects, which are very, very important, were basically optical character recognition, handwritten character recognition, machine translation, then cross-lingual information access, and sign languages, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the funded projects with the government initiated along with the best of institutes in India, like the IITs, triple IITs, C-DAC, and even the engineering students and colleges put together. And I think we have seen some of the fruits of those by way of various technologies which has come up. So this is in a broad sense, which the government has played a very, very vital role. As I said to you, standardization. Secondly, the compliances are very, very important in regards with how you comply with the language technology, because that's also very important. So government has initiated certain things. One more important shift which has happened over that people have shifted over to the mobile. And obviously at that point of time, the mobiles were the basically feature phones were there. Basically, they didn't have a smartphone. So even at that point of time, there were a lot of solutions which were being provided onto the smartphone. So the government thought of all the mission mode projects which are there, like your e-courts, then basically MCA 21 programs, and so on and so forth. So the government realized the need of having an Indian languages into that, and actually had made certain policy changes, as well as funded a huge amount of money into the research activity. So that's over a period of time, I will definitely dwell further on this, but these are some of the initiatives which government has undertook for last several years, basically. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thanks so much, sir. So you have touched upon some core aspects of what we are going to discuss. One of the things that I wanted to check was about the components of a multilingual internet system. I think you have touched on some of them already. I will request Akshat, if you can, if there is some more light you can throw on this, and then a little bit about what you are doing about democratizing the Indian access, Indian internet access points.
I guess Kulkarni sir has already painted a very good broad canvas about what has already gone into in terms of standardization and core development, fundamental development regarding Indian languages. Talking about some basic components that make up the multilingual internet, essentially after the background work comes the content, that the content should be available in more and more terms over the internet. Other one being the availability of various internet-based services into the multilingual fashion. That is another broad area, which is definitely one of the prime highlights of a multilingual internet. Other than that, specifically talking about democratizing the internet access points, I would like to highlight one key development that has happened in recent years is the development of internationalized domain names and development of internationalized email. That is something that as a technology has been around since many years. The only thing that has been lacking in that particular area is the adoption of the same. Why that is very important? Because in terms of availability of multilingual content, universal encoding, everything is kind of a solved problem. Even the websites are available in multilingual. If one decides, they can have it. The only the thing that remains is the way to access those websites is through domain names. And till very recent years, it was not easily available because the way internet DNS system is oriented, the domain name system was primarily 8-bit. And multilingual content had started coming onto the internet bandwagon with 16-bit requirement. So there was a via media that was needed to be developed, and ICANN, IETF, all organizations have worked towards developing the standards that make sure that the domain names are also available into the multilingual fashion. And thereby, eventually technology, internet email protocols also evolved to give internationalized emails. So the only problem that these two particular technologies are facing is it's kind of become a chicken and egg problem, because most of the services that people can avail through internet-based portals, you have to use your email ID so at times a gateway to create your profile on that. And if most of the systems kind of put barriers onto the internationalized domain names and email IDs, and that becomes a hindrance for a wider adoption of IDNs and internationalized emails. There is a wide movement that has been coined by even by Government of India through National Internet Exchange of India, as well as the nodal organization from internet infrastructure point of view, that is ICANN. The initiative is called Universal Acceptance of Multilingual Domain Names. Universal acceptance is the term that is widely used in this context, wherein you make sure that all the internet-based services are equally treating all the domain names, regardless of whether it is a multilingual domain name or a standard Latin one. And as an extension, the internationalized email ID. So that is something that work is, I would probably eventually further dwell upon once we get into the details of it. But that's what is the meaning of democratizing the internet access points.
Thanks, Akshat. And we'll revisit that point in a little bit about IDNs. I now come to Nakul. Nakul is right in the midst of one of the most exciting times with a startup called Devnagri. Nakul, it'll be nice to hear what was the exact gap in the system that you set out to address, and how is it going so far?
Sure. So if we talk about the opportunity market, or if we actually talk about the Indian internet, so we have to understand the size of India. So there will be about 90% of India which will be coming onto the internet, which is, if we actually talk about the numbers, so more than 100 crore Indians to join Indian internet in next couple of years. However, the content availability in Indian languages is only 0.1%. We have already got the cheap smartphones and then almost free internet. However, the content availability in Indian languages is not there. And I think this is the biggest gap what we as Devnagri is solving. So how we are actually solving is we have created a perpetual translation engine wherein we are providing the contextual results which is actually lacking in online translation engines. So if you talk about any kind of industry, so we are actually dominating the translation industry. So you can get the translated content. However, when you actually talk about the domain specific translated content, this is where the internet is actually lacking. So if you talk about any segment like BFSI or education or publishing, so our system understands the domain specific keywords. Our system understands the glossaries which have to be used and the sentence formations which have to be used for a particular domain. So this is where we are coming from, and we have actually created a complete ecosystem when we talk about the Indian languages, and this is what we are actually delivering to the market. And if we actually talk about the government, so there are number of government mandates also with respect to for almost every industry. So government is also pushing hard to the industries to go vernacular, because there is a die-hard need of getting the things into indigenous languages. So there is a mandate for the BFSI sector, and there is a mandate for the EdTech sector to take all the educations or the BFSI into different vernacular languages, because that is the area which actually helps the businesses to bring next billion onto the internet, and that's where the actual economy will start working. If we actually talk about the current economy, so the businesses are almost getting saturated. So next, or the new business which will come into the market and which may be a gateway to next $5 trillion economy, which our PM always says. So I think this is where the actual business comes from, when businesses will start looking onto those tier 2, tier 3 cities market and get the customers onto the platforms. So I think going vernacular is a need of an hour, and then along with the government, we are also trying to take the content into different languages.
Thanks, Nakul. And I think that's really the core of what we are trying to address. Maheshji, I want to just come back to you. So basis what Nakul is doing and even what Akshat was saying, I think one of the main requirements would be the tools and technologies, and the role of, new era platforms like artificial intelligence and machine learning. You have done an enormous amount of work in this area. So would you like to share some thoughts on how this will enable this movement going forward?
Yeah, thank you. I think we have kept a good canvas in regards with the language technology. As was been indicated that data is becoming very, very prominent. If you talk about AI or ML type of technology to be used into the natural language processing. So as I said to you earlier, systems were dependent upon rule based basically. So linguistic rules were supposedly to be there. And based upon the linguistic rules, the systems were being made. Example, as I can give you, transliteration. So it's a simple requirement that there is a huge database of, let us say, voters ID, and you too need to do the name translation, or let us say it's a banking data, the account numbers, and so on and so forth. So these were earlier where they were driven by the rules, and you require a very special experts, basically language technology experts, to handle those rules, basically. So we have come a very long way towards that, basically. And as you can see, with the advent of data, things have been a little bit rather improving a lot at a great speed. So the data availability is very, very important. Data is a new economy. Data is a new oil, as has been told worldwide. And the main ingredients to the machine learning is the data. So that's again, as Nakul was also saying, that data becomes a paramount importance. So once the data is available, you have to use the data, prune the data, and infer the data, depending upon in which domain you are or application which you are using. Let us say you are having a text to speech, so you require a voice data basically for that. Or if you require a speech recognition, also you require a voice data. If you look at the optical character recognition, you require a annotated image corpus basically to take care of the machines and see to it that the models are being trained. The important and a very fortunate part, I term these systems as a human inspiring systems basically. So when I use the word human inspiring systems, which necessarily mean that the machine should react or act just like a human being. So that is what we term as the artificial general intelligence. And to make artificial general intelligence, you need to train the system the way the human is being trained, or the human has got that particular knowledge. And it's not that easy basically, because we have got all the different sources of information. Like at a point of time, we see also, we hear also, and we can speak and we can do all the things basically. Or similar way, the coming systems which are there, when we talk about something like a metaverse basically coming up. So here in all these, the data is not now being seen in isolation. The important point is that the data has to be seen together, which necessarily means the audio data, the video data, the text data, everything, the emotions and everything has to be considered as a one set of data, and then the inferencing and everything can happen basically. So AI ML is going to really play a very, very important role into the natural language processing. And as was being told, machine translation is one of the very, very important application toward that. The voice recognition is also a very important application toward that. Because in India, if you really look at it, we have got almost 78% of the people staying in villages. Okay, so this is very, very important. If you want to bring these people into the mainstream, then definitely you require such a human inspiring system. So voice driven applications are going to be on the top, backed up by the something called the machine translation. So which means that S2S, speech to speech technologies are very going to be very very important. So let it be Ola's, or let it be Uber's, or let it be Facebook's, or let it be any social media applications basically. These are going to be catalyze the whole process. It is not all about accessing the internet for basically fun purposes, but it is for educational purposes. It is for all the services like agricultural, health, medicine, and everything put together. So I think if the languages becomes as absolutely important in this particular area. Now the important task where it is there. So you must have seen most of the banking industries has also put voice-driven assistants. So if you go to the bank site, they do have. So these are earlier it was not there. Now we have got a visual assistants coming up, and they whatever you query. So it is the systems have gone a very long way, and they can understand your intentions of a query, and then they can respond to you. So this is what we are seeing in a new world when you talk about the AI ML. So I am going to put light on some basic technologies still which are required to be developed in the later portion of my, suppose if there is a query, and later portion I can cover up that. But as of now, as I said to you, there are a lot of requirements in terms of the basically using AI ML in natural language processing, especially for the voice-driven assistant, natural language search. So searching also is a very important task. Today, if you look at the searches, Then their keyword searches, Google search have become a little bit more advanced now in this case, but they fail to basically to a maximum certain extent. I'm not going to say at all points, but it is not able to understand the linguistic nuances. Means, for example, some of the search engines, we do have a lot of lemmatizers, basically. Means we have got inflectional forms. If you search for ladka, then you should get ladka, ladkao, and so on and so forth. And so some of the fundamental tools, technologies are still required to be developed to have the search engines as powerful as which is happening for English language. We should have those, especially when Akshat touched upon the point of email. We definitely require basically spam filters for Indian languages, which still today not there basically. So they are all English driven, and that's some of the hindrances when we talk about why people are not adapting. So some of these issues still are existing, but I'm not going to say that they are not been solved. They are been getting solved by the great startups which are there basically, and I think we are going to see a very good what is called a development in this particular area for coming maybe not years, but obviously 1 or 2 years basically. Thank you.
Thanks. Amazing. I think this is a huge topic. And I think you have given Akshat a chance to, I think I wanted to focus a little bit on the problem areas for universal acceptance, what you mentioned. I think Mahesh ji has already touched upon that. In your IDN work and work with ICANN, what are the real pain areas that you're facing and how are you seeing it being solved?
Thanks, Gajendra. The thing is, so when we are talking about multilingual internet, we have to kind of differentiate it into two different broad areas. One of those is technological enablement, and other one being the policy aspect of it. Because if you see internet, though governed by a set of standards, the services and the people's interaction with the internet is driven by the policies, governing policies adopted by various layers of organizations that deal with the internet-based services. It could be at the nodal level, it could be Internet Engineering Task Force for technical implementation, ICANN for policy implementation. Further down the line, you get registries which delegate the domain names. They control some of the policies, enablement, disablement of certain formations of domain names. And then down the stream there, you have applications, people-facing applications, which directly deal with the people, right? So I would like to just draw upon attention towards that hierarchy and a set of protocols that get developed towards enabling people's requirements from a multilingual internet. And so you asked what are pain points. I would rather turn it a bit into a set of opportunities that exist in that particular space for especially the technocrats like Nakul, the technology evangelists and pioneers like Kulkarni sir, and many young students who could be wanting to take a test of what exactly is a policy formation process like. So I would just like to draw upon that at ICANN and at some of the initiatives of NICSI, there are some phenomenal policy initiatives which are being inclusive in terms of participation by general public at large. They are going on. There are various forums at which these discussions go on. And these are some very exciting opportunities for students, I would say, to start looking towards these issues and see the possible solutions that they can come up with and participate, make your voice felt. One of the things that I would like to touch upon in terms of actual problems that could be there. So internationalized email is something that looks to be a very opportune thing going ahead, wherein people would get multilingual email IDs, right? As a technology, it sounds to be a very good thing. But if you see the implementation and actual interaction side of it, there are some downsides. So for example, suppose we start creating email IDs into Devnagri, Tamil, Telugu, those scripts I'm talking about. People would make their email IDs, services and all. Suppose hypothetically, let's start thinking that they become popular. But if I get an email from, say, because my native is Marathi, Hindi, and Devnagri script is familiar to me. If I get an email from a Tamil person, I have to understand who is the person to understand the contents, right? So for example, to read the content of it, maybe Nakul's Devnagari might solve my problem by doing the machine translation of it. But when it comes to the identifier, the email part of it, I might not be able to make out who is sending because I don't understand the script. Now, this is where the policy aspects come into picture. in terms of like, do we need a technological solution to this particular issue, or do we need a policy solutions? And those discussions are currently going on. And so these are some of the exciting opportunities for students to at least start giving an ear to these discussions, and if possible, participate. There is a very good opportunity to create your doctoral thesis and all into these particular things. ThinkTrans particularly, we are, in your introduction, you said that I'm working with actually ICANN. It's not like in a personal capacity, but my company is working with ICANN on certain projects that directly deal with the universal acceptance through IDNs and email IDs, and making sure that software systems are more open to their adoption. So we are working on some of the projects which are very exciting from that space. We're also working on enabling the student ecosystem from becoming a bit more entrepreneurial and become enthusiastic startups, successful startups like Nakul is currently running. So we are working in that space, and I would rather say that's these are exciting times for those discussions and technological advances.
Sure. Thanks so much, Akshat, for that. And I would then ask Nakul, who is actually implementing some of this real hardcore work in the market, to share what do you think are the problem areas which your tools have solved, and where do you find the bottlenecks actually? Like, the literal translation versus, the actual meaning.
So the main thing what companies or businesses are actually looking at is majorly at a colloquial kind of translation, which is not a actual translation, but more of a vocal translation, which we actually the kind of translation which we actually use in day-to-day life. So this is what companies are expecting. The kind of use cases what we are dealing with, the companies are obviously they are not limited to websites and mobile application, but we have to actually get inside into the industry to understand the kind of use cases. So what we have realized is that mobile application websites are only a part of the use case when it comes to the content translation. There are other use cases, like if we talk about government, there are big size of documents which needs a vernacular support. So government actually has a data center rooms wherein all the file systems are there. So their job is to first digitize the content and then take that digitized content into different languages, because this is the mandate from the government. This is number one. Then talk about the content which they are actually publishing on day-to-day basis, be it their reports, be it their regular communication letters or emailers or n number of things. And then talk about the training and learning modules. Then talk about the presentation decks they are sharing. Talk about the chatbots for user engagement. Talk about there will be a new market which will be soon coming up in India, which is basically the ticketing market. So once the users will start coming onto the internet, there will be a new market of ticket which will be created. So taking those ticketing system into different vernacular languages. Then talk about the voice concept. So everything, the voice is actually translated real time on the air. So for example, if your customer, you have a one call center and then customer is speaking in Kannada and you are a Punjabi listener. So you can actually reply in Punjabi and then your customer is getting the reply in Kannada. So these kind of cases, which is actually a need of an hour. And once this ecosystem is created for the Indian languages, I think this will actually enable the businesses to cut down their short, and then they can actually think about this concept in a very, very productive way and in a different way is something what we expect.
Thanks, Nakul, for those. And I think we are really headed towards the end of it because the time was limited. I want to come back to Mahesh Kulkarniji, sir, and I'd request you to give your final comments because you are the best placed to address. You are part of some of these large committees that the government has created for Bhasha Internet, and some really high-level discussions are going on. So, considering all these aspects and that startups like Nakul's are already working, what do you think are the key policy areas that we could really push on and foresee that this will solve the problem?
I think government has taken a lot of initiatives in terms of the research side, especially looking at the requirements, because we have got I'm not going to say challenge, we have got an opportunity of 22 minimum. So we have got 22 scheduled languages as of now. And basically, there are many languages already encoded into the Unicode. So if you really look at it, so we have got actually opportunities of many. This is one part. Secondly, when we say there is an opportunity of many, then it has to work in tandem. This is very, very important. So one, as has been rightly told by Akshat, one, you require a technological solutions. Other end, you require something called the policy part of it to implement, basically. And the third part important is that having a policy is not going to be sufficient, but you definitely require the compliance of the policy. This is the important part, basically. So somebody has to be there who should be able to comply, verify that it has been complied. At most of the steps, government has taken an appropriate decision in terms of these particular policies. So some of the policies, I'm not going to say they're the policies, but some of them are recommendations, some of them are standards, and some of them are policies. So if you really look at recommendations, then government is already through the e-governance platforms, basically all the NEGP program, what you see, all the mission for projects and everything put together, the government has already made mandatory to use Unicode. This is very, very important step which has been taken. Second step which has been taken is the availability of the Indian language keyboard, basically because every person may end utilizing 2 or 3 languages, okay, end up in utilizing 2 or 3 languages. And hence there was a suggestion to come with an on-screen keyboard, basically. So these are some of the recommendations, guidelines. Then the type of the font which is to be used, which type of font is to be. So government has suggested that we should use the open font format so that there is a universality in the data. So there is no data loss. Okay, there are, however, small challenges that still exist, but those are over a period of time, those definitely will go away. This is one part. Secondly, in terms of basically the again mandating portion, if you really see on the mobile platform, the government already come out with the basically standard saying that it has got to have at least a 3 language formula, which necessarily means that the feature phones or a smartphone should at least have 3 languages onto that. One is the English, another is Hindi, and one is the regional language. This is one part. And display should be in all Indian languages, which necessarily means that if you want to sell your mobile into India, then the government has already taken up, and this was being dwell with all the manufacturers. It is not like that the government takes a decision on their own. It is all about multi-stakeholderism, basically, where all participants are there, basically, who takes the decision on that. Then GIGW guidelines, which are there, which are something called the guidelines for web development, Government of India guidelines for web. And therein also the language components are being fitted into that. So any Government of India website is being designed, developed, then it should follow certain things. Now coming to some of the basically the data part of it, government has already talked about a lot of programs, and if you must have heard about one of the latest program is Bhashini Program, basically government's Bhashini Program. And the idea of this Bhashini Program is to collect as much as data with a crowdsource model, okay, and it's open to all, basically. So the data is not all about text data, but it is a something called the parallel corpus, the image data, the speech data, and everything put together. And they're inviting the students community or everybody basically into that to validate, rectify, and so on and so forth. And they are giving some motivational mechanism to you. So this is coming from that angle. On the policy front, I will touch upon the point of universal acceptance, which has been discussed by Akshat in a broad level. Actually, the government is very, very seriously thinking of bringing certain policies onto the universal acceptance. So you will be able to hear some of them in coming weeks, probably in that case, basically, where in universal acceptance, because we are in an advantageous situation, unlike the other global players, because we do have all as of today, we have got all 22 Indian language domain names. We can have that, basically. So it's not a technological problem at this moment of time. It is more of a policy problem as well as a compliance problem. Then some of the things, as I said to you, that we should have certain things. I'm not going to use the word mandated because mandated attracts something else, basically. So at least all the Government of India websites should be 3 language formula. You should use 3 language formula. So if it is a central website, then it has to have all 22 languages. But if it is something called a state government website, then it can be in 3 language formula, wherein it can be Hindi, the regional language, and the English language. We worked with something called the Maharashtra government, wherein by default, basically in all their RFPs and everything, the development was supposed to happen or language with language support. So which necessarily means that by default language and English optional. So if this type of a strategy has been adopted, basically, then your actual systems are already universally ready. They are also already globalized. They are already internationalized. So you don't have to do anything much more onto that. You have to just add the language on top of it. So the idea, if this idea is mooted, that for example, whatever government starts or whatever applications is going to develop, they should be initially developing their own original language, and English can be optional or added languages can be done. So these are some of the things, right from standardization, then compliance part of it. So STQC is already roped into that. And we are also thinking the government, some of the, I mean, still in some of the committees basically, and trying to look at how this ecosystem can be totally knitted together, especially because compliance is very, very important. Secondly, the motivational mechanism, because you have to have a business also. It's not like that it's all on an emotional quotient. So finally, at the end of the day, anybody going to have, let us say, a company is there, XYZ company is there, and if we are forcing them to have a 22 Indian language website, why they will do that? I think we need to answer this question basically. Why they need to do that? If they see a business avenues on top of it, then they will be doing. Similar way applies for the universal acceptance and so on and so forth. We can, maximum possible, the government can make an appeal, or government can suggest, government can recommend it. But then finally, at the end of the day, it's all business deals basically, or business decisions which are being taken. And I think if these business decisions are being looked at from a perspective of basically social cause, probably certain things can be definitely be speeded up in this regard. So this is just some pointers I wanted to provide on this particular subject matter. Some of the areas, like let us say agriculture area is there, you take educational area is there, then you take health side, you take. I think these services need to be definitely in the language, because otherwise the meanings are totally different basically. Even you look at the codes, e-codes. So there are various projects going on to translate the content from a lower code to a higher code, because in the lower code, the whole proceedings happen in the local language, regional language. While it moves to the higher code, it happens into the English, and hence the translations are to be really, really good. Nakul will support me on this, because sometimes you end up having a funny translation. Okay, like let us say you want to translate curtain raiser event, and I saw some of the translation coming very funnily. Parda uthane wala karyakram. So that is the those type of stuff. See, machine translation or the use of ML is also disastrous at point of time basically. Correct. Because it will go on to the existing data, existing knowledge base, and so on and so forth, but it will not capture the essence, it will not capture the meaning. So we don't require a machine translation system per se. We require something called the transcreation system. I generally use machine transcreation system, which means that you understand the meaning of the sentence. Not necessarily you should have word-to-word translation. You can just capture the essence, the meaning, because finally at the end of the day, you are going to convey only the meaning. It is not whether it is written in Chinese or it is Japanese or it is in Marathi or in any language. Correct. It might be a full para, but I can sum up, suppose, let us say, an exact meaning is being conveyed in 2 lines. What is the harm in that? So we require not a machine translation system, we require a transcreation system. So these are some of the things which are going to be taking time, and government is putting a lot of efforts in the research area. As I said to you, the Bhashini program is there. The secondly, government has already had the NPLT, rather some platform wherein the data is available to the startup companies and so on and so forth, and they can contribute also. So there are various government programs which are been going on. One can visit TDL-DC.in site. One can visit NPLT.in site. One can visit Bhashini site. And there are a lot of organizations like IITs, triple ITs, and everybody. You can see and go to their websites and see their initiatives in this particular area. I think we are really doing a good job. I'm only going to say that since our challenges are 22, multiplier 22. Let us say even if you take a question of machine translation, you require a lot of tools. Basically, the tools which are required are, we are not talking about a grammar checker. We are not talking about a spell checker. We are not talking about something called the name entity recognitions and so on and so forth. So those are some of the basic fundamental research is still yet to be done. And as has been told by Akshat and even Nakul, for example, this can be done by startup very well. Only the question is that we need to provide them the funds. We require to provide them some data, and I think they will do the wonders over there. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. And clearly, this is such a vast area, and we are right at the beginning of solving this. I'm sure Nakul will have many more points to add, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I would like to call this session to an end. So Mahesh Kulkarniji, thank you so much for your great input, sir, and thoughts. I think we will have many more discussions on this going forward. Akshat, thank you so much for your time. And Nakul also, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for such an engaging session.